I don't know, I'm thinking this spoon might be a little bit too big. What do you think? Yeah, I was being sarcastic. So those of you who don't understand sarcasm, I was being sarcastic. It's actually the same size as the sprue that I normally use. This is my normal sprue, my round one anyway. I've got square ones that are basically the same size. And you can see that they're actually the same size at the bottom of the sprue. Not up here at the top, obviously, but down here at the bottom. They're the same size. So it looks tiny, but it ain't all that tiny. And being Valentine's Day, I figured, you know what, let's cast something nice for the wife. You know, if she's hung in there with me for, it'd be 39 years this October. 39 years. 40 that we've known each other. Wow. Seems incredible. Anyway, so I want to do something nice for for Valentine's Day, and I thought I would cast a jewelry box with a removable lid. And this box has a couple of unique challenges, which I think will make it for, you know, an interesting, at least mold making video, and then we'll do the pour. There are a couple of things that are going to be, you know, something we're going to have to deal with. First one is this lip that's on the bottom of the lid that actually fits in here and keeps this thing from coming off. That's got to have to get molded into the sand. And then, of course, we're going to have to make a core for the inside of the box as well. And that's kind of why we're here with this tiny little sprue. I wanted to try something different today. Normally I do a false cope. Today I'm going to do a false drag. Why not? You know, why not? But in order to do a false drag, I had to have a really short sprue, one that would not come above the surface of my coat, because when I turn it over, I can't have this thing sticking out and getting rammed around and everything. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. I know you always say you like it when I show you my mistakes. Well, you're in for a treat today, because there are mistakes that were made. It caused me to have to do 2 pours. So there you go. Those of you that want to see metal pour out of a crucible, you get to see 2 pours as well. And yeah, finally, I actually polished this thing. I never polish stuff. So there you go. There's 3 things for you to enjoy. Let's go to the video. I'll just talk during the highlights of the things I want to show you. Make sure we show you all the pours. And we'll come back at the end and show you the finished product. Okay, so as I just said, we're going to do a false drag this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ram up the runner and spin trap in my drag. That way I can position things in the cope when I ram up a real cope for this thing. Get everything covered up with parting compound just so I want it to release. Now, I should mention too that you're about to see that the sand is going in. It is actually really, really wet. Weirdest thing happened. So a guy, a friend, Russ, I'll call you a friend, a subscriber of mine who lives not too far from me, actually built a muller, a really nice muller. I wish I had it. I really wish I had it. Anyway, I went up there, I think, probably a week or so before I actually made this mold. And I mold the sand. I'd never molded my sand before. And we added too much moisture at the time. It didn't feel this wet. And I let it set sealed up for a week. And it really, really felt wet, and it felt like glue. So number one mistake, my sand was way too wet. I knew it was too wet, but there was really nothing I could do about it. I didn't have any way of drying it out, short of pouring metal into it, which is essentially what I just do. What I do here is I just, you know, make a mold, pour metal in it, and we're going to make it again. But you can kind of see how wet it is. It's just too wet. And we always want to ram around the outside of the mold first, just because it actually helps hold things in place while we're ramming everything in the middle. Sometimes you can ram and you can actually move things around in the sand if you haven't got it firm enough around the parts or the pattern. So I always ram around the outside of the edge first, just to kind of hold things in place. Okay, everything's cleaned up. We got it. We're going to turn over, and you can kind of see with the surface of the sand here how wet, what the wetness it did to it. It kind of clumped together, like it was almost like glue. So I didn't get a nice smooth finish in this drag, and the same thing's going to happen when I do the coat. So now we've got the drag, the false drag rammed up. We're going to go ahead and place our patterns onto the sand, including the pattern for my gate. And I went ahead and printed this with this, so it's had the same radius as the parts of the heart that it actually connected to. You can see this is my solution to getting that lip molded into the part. I'm just going to press the lid down until the flat part of the lid is touching the sand of the drag. So now I've got the lip down into the drag, but everything else is going to be cast up in the coat. Pretty simple solution, and it actually turned out to worked out really, really well for me. We're going to end up taking all this apart when we do the coat, but next thing we'll do is we'll ram up the coat on top of it. And there's that little tiny sprue. Good thing I was so careful placing that gate there, wasn't it? And you can almost see in the sieve that I'm using for putting this first course of sand down. It doesn't want to come through. I've got to have to press it through. It was just way, way, way too wet. See, it's sticking to the sides. It's just no bueno, no bueno at all. You can see I'm trying to be careful with that sprue. It's down below the surface of the coat top. Here we go, fingers crossed. See if we can get this thing to open up. God, always sand hanging up on this flask of mine. Deep breath, go. Come on, come on. Ah, you chicken. There you go. And you can still see sand falling off all over the place from the outside of my flask. See how that worked out really well. So we'll do basically, we're not going to do it the same way now when we ram up this drag. We're going to go ahead and ram it up so that lip is in the drag. We'll ram it up from the bottom side this time. But that pressing it in there worked out really well in a nice, well-defined place and held the heart in place like it needed to be. There you look at the sand. I'll zoom in here. You can see the sand just doesn't look great. It was just way too wet. Have to press this in here carefully. I don't want it to screw up the mold because the cope is set now. The cope has got what it needs in it. Again, we're going to really coat this with parting compound because I'm going to essentially have two cores now. I'm going to have a core inside the lid and another bigger core inside the box itself. Me trying to find dryer sand. It doesn't exist. So we're just going to go ahead and riddle some more of this super wet sand into our drag, and we'll get it finished off. So that's a big clue to you. If you have a sieve like this that you use to riddle your sand on, and you're having trouble getting it to go through, it might be a clue to you that your sand is too wet. And we're just getting the drag finished off now. We get it flipped cope side up, and see if we can't get this thing opened up, but not quite yet. We got to cut in the basin first. As always, we get our offset pouring basin cut in there. It's just about 30 millimeters deep. That's probably what, an inch and a quarter-ish kind of thing deep. And we'll cut the ridge somewhere around 10 millimeters, or maybe half an inch off the bottom. None of those numbers are ultra critical. You want a basin big enough that you can use it to control the flow of the metal into the mold and use it sort of as a dampening system. And you want a ridge that's tall enough to stop the metal from its horizontal splashing. And as soon as you you start pouring into that basin, you don't want that splash to go down the sprue if you can help it. So we put the ridge in there to stop that from happening, and then let the metal flow over the top of over the ridge, fill the sprue, and keep the sprue full the entire time we're pouring. All right, so here's another mistake that I made, and I'm almost ashamed to admit this happens way too often. Normally, I have holes drilled in these things so that I can stick a screw in there and I can just pull them straight out. Well, I thought about it, And I thought, nah, I gotta get this thing molded up. And of course, I put it in without a hole in there. And now I'm trying to pull it out of there with a couple of tweezers that are, tiny little things to get it. Again, I can't grab hold. They keep slipping off. And oh, God, it's stupid. By the time I pour the second mold, I've got a hole drilled in there. And with a little brushing off, we're all cleaned up and we've got a nicely formed pouring basin. I want to put a bunch of vents in from the surface here, partly because this sand was just so wet and it was so dense that I was afraid that I'd have a lot of steam and I'd have a lot of pressure get built up in there and I would not fill the mold. So you see me poking this wire down. Poking the wire down to the top doesn't leave a mark on the cast part. Typically, in most cases, I'm not even hitting the pattern. Occasionally, I might hit the pattern, but I never see little nubs that I've got to get rid of. It's a nice, easy way to vent. Only takes a few seconds, and it doesn't leave stuff I got to clean up on the part, which is really really advantageous. Now you'll notice when I do the second pour, I don't vent it. Pray that it comes open clean, and it looks like it did. Yay. I'm not hitting this very hard, just tapping it to try to loosen up the pattern on the sand. Just enough so I can get it to come off. A little bit tougher, there's not as much surface to be able to tap against. Which one? Which one? Nice. Got a nice core for the inside of the box there. I'm going to clean up the edges on the gate. Don't want any loose sand breaking off into the mold, so we're just going to go ahead and clean it up right now. Kind of radius for our sprue to runner junction. I'm playing around with the basin. I'm going to take the cope off again here, and after this trial close, and blow everything out again. So anything I knocked in the hole we'll take care of right now. And the reason we do the second close, this trial close, is the first close is the trial close, is when you drop the cope down onto the drag, a lot of times sand will fall off onto your pattern, and you don't want that on your surface of your mold. So you open it up again, blow it off, put it back together again, and hopefully all of that loose sand has already been taken care of now. So we'll go ahead and get ready to pour. There we go. Nice, easy pour into the offset basin. We don't pour directly down the sprue. Keep the sprue full the entire time so we're not sucking air into the mold. And a nice pour. There we go. All right. Come apart. There you go. Hey, you see all that steam? Does that give you an indication that my sand was just a little bit wet? That's crazy. I'd never had that kind of steam coming off. So this sand was just horrible wet. Look at how wet that is. It's crazy. How many times can I say that today? How wet is that sand? Looking at the lid, I can already see the surface is not great. And I've also got pretty good shrinkage right there on the thing. So that's another failure, and I fix that in the second pour. All right, so here we are. We're going to go into the second pour. I'll show you the two parts side by side here at the end of the video, but I've already rammed up everything again. The sand is drier after using it once. I've taken a lot of moisture out of it, and it's pretty good. It's in pretty good shape now. It's actually still just a little bit wetter than I would prefer, but it's not terrible. And you'll see the surface of this is not going to be bad either. So you'll also notice right there, I'm cleaning up around a feeder. We feed parts with feeders. Yes, that is a pet peeve of mine. We feed parts with feeders. Anyway, I just radius the edge. And one of the reasons you want to radius your feeders where they're touching the part is if you do a nice sharp edge, you don't radius it, when it starts to shrink, it's going to pull that sharp edge down into the face of your part. It's just what happens, right? So if you radius it, it's not going to pull it into the part. You're not going to have a low spot right where the feeder touches the part. It just comes much cleaner. It's actually a lot easier to take off as well. I can just cut it off, and then I can just cut down to the surface of the part. I don't have to go down deeper than the surface of the part. You can just see the sand. I mean, on top, it looks finer, and it's just because it's drier. So there was our trial close. We'll get it opened up. We'll blow it out again, and then we'll pour the second one. So that's another point. If your sand looks like it's coarser than it should, um, it may be that it gets too wet, because my sand, when it gets wet, it looks much coarser than it really is. And we'll get them closed back up here and get ready for the pour. Pour number 2. We go same thing again, right? Get the crucible down close to the basin. Nice, easy pour in. Keep the sprue full the whole time. Keep it full. You'll see the metal start coming up through the feeder. There it is right now. And again, it doesn't come up through the vent for the spin trap because it's frozen up. Yay. Look at how, did you see how much cleaner that came out of there? It didn't have the big clump of wet sand. We're not seeing the steam. Just a much better pour all around. We'll get this one out of the sand and take a look at it. All right, so here's the first one I poured. You can see the surface is not real great. You can see on the side there, it's really lumpy, just almost kind of spiky. You can see the second one here, much smoother surface, much cleaner. The surface on the top, the surface on the sides, everything is just much smoother when that sand dried out some. And here we go with the lid as well. The lid on the right is the first one I poured with no feeder. And you can see right in the middle, there's a dimple where it shrunk. Again, look at the surface. You can see that the surface is night and day different between the two. And again, there's that radius that I was talking about. It'll be nice and easy to cut off. And it fed the part just like it needed to. Didn't have any shrinkage. So as it's shrinking in, again, I'm trying to tell you, as it shrinks in, it's going to want to pull metal into the surface. So radius it. All right, you can see I've cut the feeder off now. Just want to see if it closes up, and it does. Look at that. What a thing of beauty. Now we start the fun part. Yeah, this fun part. All the sanding that's got to happen. So I started off with like 120. I went, 120. I went to 220 or 400 to 800. I went up to 1300 grit to try to get it smooth. 1300 is nice as it gets it smooth, but it makes it turn gray. And even I tried using a lubricant like WD-40, not a lubricant, an oily kind of stuff, kerosene basically, WD-40. Again, it cuts well, but it just didn't clean. It's just a pain. It's a lot of work. You can see on the surface there, that feeder cut off nice and clean. There's no evidence of it on the top of the part now. All right, well, here it is finished off. All polished up. It is a thing of beauty. I'll go ahead and put it down here on the bench here, and we'll take a closer look at it. Here it is polished up. The lid is on. You can see that it fits. It fits nicely around the edges. Pretty happy with that. It's got the old brand right there in the back edge of it, back side of it. And here it is. The lid comes off. You can see the surface of the finished metal. This was I didn't do anything to the inside. So that's what came out of the sand. Pretty nice, much nicer than this one where the sand was all wet. Just night and day difference. In terms of the quality of the finish. So there it is, full of candy, not full of jewelry. So hopefully she likes it. Hopefully you guys you liked it too. As always, be a blessing to somebody. Do something nice for somebody. Say an encouraging word. Let's leave it at that. Let's say an encouraging word today. Tell someone they did a good job. It's easy to do. Tell them thank you for something. Easy to do. Let's see. As always, you guys stay safe out there. Have a great day. Don't tell her.